In all the mainstream spiritual circles, they're talking about 3 days of darkness. In grade school science, we learned darkness is condensed light. And so that's how we could even apply it to the subconscious. What comes to me in understanding the role of the sun and our atmosphere, the amount of light, and our ability to perceive our physical surroundings in the presence of what we call light. On the darkest night, that's the densest amount of light. So it's perfectly light outside when our eyes are perceiving it as the darkest, blackest night, where we can't see our hand in front of our face outside. That's actually when the most amount of light is present in our environment. Now, when our part of the earth is exposed to the sun through the atmosphere, it increases certain amounts of certain light spectrums that our eyes can now perceive the separation, the difference in the amount of color or light spectrum in the items around us, including our physical self. So 3 days of darkness could actually be what they're also talking about in the spiritual circles, and the mainstream spiritual circles, about the 3 days of light. They're predicting 3 days of a flash of light, or not even 3 days of it, but just one significant flash of light. And if I'm understanding it correctly, I've already had an experience of what that means this past spring. And I called it the Snicklefritz. Everybody's subconscious, their authentic human consciousness came out, and the spirits that occupy our bodies, calling it reincarnation. And if you want to see an example of what I'm talking about, you can watch the movie The Host. So now these entities lose their ability to hold on to one body, because the human consciousness and the subconscious rise to the surface. It rises in power. It becomes aware of itself and has full control over the body. And so these entities start bouncing from body to body. And with the subconscious being conscious and in control of the body, the intuition, the empathy, the telepathy, people are actually reading the minds of the people around them. So, for example, I saw two spouses with a child on the beach there, the South Beach in Miami, Florida. And she's ranting about what his subconscious is projecting. It's not coming out his mouth, but she's talking about, oh, how he hates her and blah, 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 blah. And it's, the last word walking away, normally spoken under the breath, like half hoping that the person would hear it, but just saying it out loud. So that's why I called it the Snicklefritz. everything was just poof. The non-physical, non-physically bound entities were bouncing from body to body because they couldn't just stay in one. The human consciousness being aware of everything that it's supposed to be aware of in its environment. I mean, it was just a very... I navigated it just fine. I survived. I preserved my consciousness, but that's only because the entity that had awakened in me so many years ago left. And the real authentic person born of this body's birth, this original soul to this body, had already been given awareness of itself and familiarity with the experience of the absence of the entity that had been occupying it since childhood. So when I was a child and I'd have experiences, for example, on the phone with a friend. Her name was Gail. So if Gail, you stumble across this, I remember this. And this was my experience of that shared experience. Grade school, called her on the phone, and I'm like, hey, does your kitchen look like this? And you could just hear her voice go like silent in shock. I had been seeing out of her eyes. I had never been to her house before. I had never been in her kitchen. She would have never described her kitchen to me. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh crap, human beings don't do that. I can't be doing that anymore. Similar experience with being in the backyard. My brother and my cousin were in the front yard, and I heard my brother trying to convince my cousin to do something bad to me. And I came running around the house, and I'm like, Derek, I heard you, and I'm going to tell. And they're like, elephant ears, and I checked that one off in the back of my mind, like, oh my God, human beings don't do that. Now, what a weird thing for a human child to say. Human beings don't do that. That was clearly an alien entity occupying my body and learning how to limit itself to the capabilities of a human being, to pass itself off as a human being. Now, when I went through my awakening, immediately I was put in contact with somebody who, and I mean, it was authentic, it was legit, the way the energy moved, everything in my experience at that time validated that this was another entity that had shared life experience, or is sharing life experience in Atlantis, and they had agreed to play the role of twin flames in this lifetime. But because it was termed, he decided he didn't want to fulfill the contract, and so her plan for this life experience, this occupation of this body, was out the window. That's it. And now I realize that that entity that went back to her body on her home planet, and during that, her returning to her body and me following it, she explained, because I'm like, why did this happen? And she said, because they wanted to know, it's prophesied that the earth is saved, that people save the earth in my generation. So they want to know how that was done. And so that was the reason for them occupying, so that they can have a presence and be able to see and witness what was going on the earth at that time. So now I spent years and years just wondering, what the heck. I'm making, personal progress, spiritual progress. My consciousness is just phenomenal, just blowing minds of the most well known psychics, the most profitable, best known channels and channelers and entities. I mean, I am right up there with them, and still there's something missing in this human's physical fulfillment and experience. And so, what came whispering through to help resolve this was what I call the dance. So I was doing, it was called the Real Witches Workbook. And one of the exercises was to ask for your own creation story. Don't believe Adam and Eve, that isn't necessarily your creation story. And immediately it was just waiting to have me be aware and understand that story, because that story is the story of what I call the dance. So immediately it came in. In the beginning was the dance. It was all feeling and flow. And it's only within the last few days that I've gotten a clear understanding of how it would flow into the desired feeling. It would have that experience of feeling, and that would initiate another desired feeling, and so it would flow into the experience of that feeling. And so it was all feeling and flow until I wonder what I look like. And then boom, that's everything, just bang. That was the big bang of my creation experience. That's how that big bang came. And as I came to understand this, I began to understand how different peoples had different creation stories, because they came out of either that bang or a different big bang, or directly out of that source, that dance, or the observer of the dance. The observer of the dance could have already been, yes, it was already in existence at the time. There was just no awareness of the source, did not have awareness of the consciousness of the dance, and the dance was not aware of the source's presence and existence. So it didn't know how it got to where it got, because the source was answering all these desires that the experience of them could be fulfilled. So that came whispering in. The dance came whispering in, and it told me what it wanted of me. And that's when I started the most conscious disassociation. So what I mean by that is, when I was younger, I completely disassociated. If I was some girl pushing me, I blacked out. I come to and I'm pounding her face. And dating a guy, we're at a party and he's trying to impress all the little girls, and he slams the door in my face when I go to walk in behind him. I black out. I come back 2 days later, and during a conversation with his mother where she's thanking me for what I did to him, just because he was firstborn Italian son and she could never discipline him, and just that. So that is not a conscious blackout, because I was not present while things were happening. Something else took over. what took over is what was left after the dance whispered to me its purpose. We had arrived at the point where its desired intention through me, with me, and for me could be made known to me. And that's when the entity that was in me upon my awakening and through my growing up, that's when it was separated from me. And the human being expressing itself right now was fully conscious and alone and in control of the body. But because it was so sudden, I would I recognized things around me, my space, and I knew it was my space and certain things about it, but I would have no clue. It was like just waking up somewhere and not knowing why I was there, what I was supposed to do, and the names of the people around me. It was just a complete blank slate. So now I'm separated. I know who I am. I know what the intentions for me are. And so that's why I made it through that Snickle Fritz when I played with the time loops. So what I did, and I saw the flash of light. I know what the flash of light is. So it's kind of like I took my physical reality, the entire neighborhood, the entire place called Slab City. I took it forward in time. We had the Snickle Fritz experience, this flash of light, these 3 days of darkness, and then we came back to the chronological 2024 time, gradually getting back into it, fitting back into it. So we diverged for a little while. We we cohabited, so people would come from the outside, and not everybody who came in at that time was Snickle Fritz. They absolutely were. I mean, we had a fire engine drive into the skate park, but the consciousness of the men driving it, they were not firemen, and they were having a blast. So I took Nyland with me as well. They say that when a human being wakes up spiritually, that it's like somebody takes an entire city, puts it out in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly flicks all the lights on. It's said that we affect a 2,000-mile radius around us. So I thought I was just cleaning up the energy, something bad that happened to me there, and I was trying to find my way out. I wanted to get out of the slabs. I didn't want to be there anymore. I did not want that to be the end of my story. I would see people with great imaginations coming up with great constructions ideas, and they all imagine like if they got $1 million, they would build there. And with $1 million, you could get yourself a better climate, a cleaner environment. But these people were stuck there. I'm like, no, I want to go to a better environment, a cleaner environment, and build something there. Because now I had an idea of what I wanted. I had dreams for myself finally. I had a sense of myself finally. I did not need to be there. It's just the worst kind of place, especially for somebody as sensitive, intuitive, and just so not wanting to wrong other people. Just not the environment for me. Definitely not. Total mismatch. But the reason, according to the law of attraction, like draws like, the entity that was occupying me was violating this body, this human consciousness, this soul, by occupying it and using it. And so all the bad karma, all that negative energy that entity was drawing because it was occupying my space against natural law, in violation of all natural law, of all rights of sentient beings. That's why all that bad karma was coming at me. And so now that's gone, and I can use all the tools that I gained over all those years in order to draw my own energy, be my own creative source, consciously be the creator of my own experience. And so when this event happens for other areas and other people, this is the nature of what is coming. And so hopefully my explanation will help anybody who wants to understand it truly, who is capable of being able, who has the cognitive functions to understand this, so that they can hold themselves together and they could obtain the spiritual gifts, the creative powers that come with it. When it happens for me, I just get to do that all over again, but without having to babysit the people around me. I'm probably going to have to help the people around me, but it's not going to be like murderous freaking, the wounds in these people won't be as deep. It won't be, no, these people are more self-possessed than anyone back there in the slabs in the Nyland area. So it'll be an easier time for me. But because I've already had practice in it, this, when it does come, it will be the beginning of my experiencing this as my base experience, my everyday experience. Not like now where I had that experience, but then I had to go right back into the 3D black. I mean, the 3D life, the 3D experience is like watching old black and white movies. Some bits of it are funny. You get the point, but there's no vibrancy to it. There's no free communication. And I so look forward to a gifting culture based on fully informed consent. That's where I can flourish. And I think a whole lot of people feel the same way. And once they're able to cognate and have the ability to perceive what that means and what that feels like, I think there are going to be a lot more people who like that. Got to get the energy even on my hands. I can't do one over the other and not go the other way. It's a weird thing. If I flick this finger, it's like I gotta go. I gotta do all the fingers. If I bump this elbow, I gotta bump this one too. I like to think it's about balancing things, you know? So I don't just scratch one side of the face. I'll do both. Gotta keep the balance, man. Gotta keep the balance.